February 28th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee. I determined that we have a quorum, so the meeting will be officially opened. Agenda is on the board. First order of business would be the review of the meeting minutes of November 15th and January 31st, which you've all been sent those previously.
I did have, I think there was one typo. Yes.
So what do you got?
Just on the 13124, third bullet in reserve fund transfer request, it says reserve, it should be reserve, it's just a misspelling. That is all I saw. Other than that, I was good.
Is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes of November 15th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? They pass. And January 31st, 2024, is there a motion to accept those?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. They pass. The next item, getting right into it, on the agenda is a presentation by Police Chief Mark Savasta, who is here with us. Even though the meeting agenda speaks to the point of the police department, we're hoping that between you and Heather, the comment could be made about regional dispatch as well. So without any further ado, Mark, the floor is yours.
All right. You want me at the podium, or you want me to take?
No, I think the podium.
Podium works?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Currently, my budget's not much different than last year, because we have some things in the works right now as far as the CBAs for the patrolmen, sergeants, and the lieutenant. So until those are completed, I really don't have too much in new funds requested. There's also going to be very limited information I can give about the collective bargaining to start that off.
Chief, do you
Yes.
have an estimated time when that will be completed?
That is between the town and the three bargaining units per se. I'm hoping sooner than later. I know the town is working extremely hard with the unions to try to get this ratified or closed up as quick as possible. To give you an honest time limit, no, I don't know. I'm hoping within a month, but who knows? Depends on how many times they can meet and if they can come to a tentative agreement.
So Heather, they met Monday night. Is there another meeting scheduled?
Monday night was just a strategy session for the select board. There was proposals out there, so at this point, we're just waiting to see where the proposals landed, and if they'll be accepted, or if we'll be going back to the table for negotiations to continue.
All right. So jumping right into the budget, on the 1210, that's the one that's up there, right, Jeremy?
Yep.
Okay. The changes currently are for my line item for the police chief salary. I already have an active collective bargaining agreement for one more year. So the increase is the 3% increase that was negotiated 4 years ago. As far as the employee wages, that number is the same as last year because of the ongoing contract talks. That's the same with the lieutenant salary and purchase services and supplies, for the most part, haven't really gone up that much. The administrative assistant, I believe I was told that it's a 2.5% increase for non-union employees. So the increase to her line item went from 56,160 to 57,775, based on that 2.5% increase. Part-time window help was eliminated a few years ago, so it has not been put back in the budget. As far as purchase services, we have about a $2,700 increase, which I will go through once we get to the purchase services page. The same with supplies, minimal increase, I believe it's $1,000. Police dues went up from $1,650 to $2,750. The $1,650 was probably in place for almost 20 years. There was no increases. Over that time frame, there's more, I should say, more people from the department that got into associations like the International Association for Chiefs of Police, the FBI leader. As I send officers to training, part of it is they're part of the organization for networking. Right now, most of my command staff, as far as the sergeant and the lieutenant, belong to organizations such as I do. So that's really where the increase is. Like I said, we haven't did anything to that for 20 years, and it was long overdue to get them more involved for future, lieutenants and chiefs that I'm hoping that they will all be at someday. Jeremy, can we switch over to the police wages?
Yes.
Okay.
Heather, which one are we looking at?
1210 is going to be employee wages. It starts with the sergeants.
It's the same document, Jeremy, it's just
Oh.
the next page. I
Yeah,
printed the
gotcha.
PDF for
There
you,
we go.
yeah.
There it
You can
is.
get it to cooperate.
Perfect.
There you go.
Could you make that a little larger
I can.
for those of us that are old?
Okay.
Don't snicker, Mr.
No, we're not snickering.
This whole page, if you can, is it up there?
There we
Okay.
go, thank you.
There's really no increase to this because most of this is collective bargaining. So this will change once the contracts are settled. But this is all something that they're actually addressing right now during their collective bargaining agreements. So that is level funded currently from last year. As soon as they finish up the contract, I'll be able to get you almost an exact number of what it's going to cost. Next page is...
So, Chief, if I can just add, in the memo in December, I did notate that even if all of the, nothing else changes in the union agreement and just continues the way it currently is, we're looking at least a $25,000 increase.
To
That-
the 780, 423.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Because that would be, if we take the current contract we're at now and we just roll it over to FY '25 with continued terms, it would still be at least a $25,000 increase. So when you're thinking in the back of your minds, how much is likely gonna be forward with the CBA, it's gonna be at least 25,000.
Okay. Next line is the administrative assistant. Like I said, that was based on the 2.5% raise I was instructed to put in there for non-union employees. Next one is purchase services. That up there. Purchase service, okay. That line item, there hasn't been much change from last year to this year. My cruiser maintenance stayed the same, general stayed the same, phone stayed the same, radio maintenance was the same. The increase to the copier and CGIS, that has to do with our copier lease that we lease, and CGIS is any, like air cards, stuff like that. So there is a slight increase to that amount. But that's just because we have another cruiser with another laptop in it. So that's where that increase came from. Trainer services was the same. Trainer services for outside consultants, for conferences, for any training that we may have here that we have to have an instructor come in. So that's what covers that. Our network and dispatch, it went up a little bit. It went up about, roughly about $1,100. And that has to do with our IMC. When we went regional dispatch, that did bring our IMC, which is our record system, the cost that we used to pay, it brought it down substantially. But this, again, also covers air cards and stuff like that, all of the air cards that are in the cruisers.
Mark, what's IMC stand for?
Well, it's not even IMC anymore. I think it's something squared now. They changed it about 6 different times. But it's our record system that we use for processing everything. So that's what we do payroll, that's what we do all our booking, that's all our records. That we can do personnel stuff with that, our maintenance on our cruises, we can keep track of all that, scheduling. So it is our complete police record system, is what it is. What IMC, I can't even remember what it was for, but like I said, now I think it's something squared. It's changed 4 or 5 times. That, unfortunately, we're subjected to whatever Holden uses. Holden stays with IMC because they're the regional system. So this cost is just for Paxton. And then each town pays their portion for the IMC record system that is used by the regional dispatch center.
Oh, so that partial is a part of the whole, everybody that's in that regional dispatch pays?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But it went down substantially. I want to tell you that before we went regional, we were probably paying $13,000 a year. And it went down this year, I believe it's about $6,700 is what we pay now. So it did go down due to the regionalization. But every year, like everything else, it squeaks up.
So it doesn't change anything, but Heather, wouldn't this belong in the regional dispatch budget?
We can most certainly move it over to that line. I think it's just, this is where it's been, but if the chief is okay with that, we would happily put it as part of the regional dispatch. I think the difference is, does that IMC cost, or whatever it is now, chief, in your budget, does that include fire side of the house?
No.
No, it's just your side.
Yeah, that's just
So they
us.
currently both have it
Yep.
separate. So if we were to combine it and put it in the dispatch, we'd have to pull it from both, but
Yep. Theirs is much less. Theirs isn't as much as ours. I want to say, I can't speak really what it is, but it's substantially less than what we pay. And I'm always up for anything. You want to remove stuff that I don't have to worry about anymore, I'm quite happy with that. Feel free. Okay, and then the next thing is really just the dues. I believe is the next page, right, Jeremy?
Supplies.
Oh, okay.
Supplies.
All right, do we have this one in here?
they're double-sided.
Oh, they are. Ah, you tricked me. Okay.
This has stayed the same.
Pretty much all of this is the same, with a couple increases. Our general line item stayed the same. Our gasoline stayed the same. Our clothing and gear, that is going to change. Right now, we have it at 12,000, but depending on what happens with collective bargaining, that line may go up. As far as cruiser equipment, we try to level fund that, office supplies, and booking room supplies. The increase to this line was really in the training equipment. That's our tasers, that includes our taser lease, which is 7,200 of that 13,900. So every year we have to lease our our tasers. And what that does is that allows us to, if they break, they're it can be replaced, no cost to us. So it's similar to our cruisers, but Taser, which is the only vendor in town for that piece of equipment, they now have moved to release for the majority of it. So that includes all of our Taser cartridges, warranties, battery replacement, and all that. So we pay $7,200 a year for 6 tasers, and that covers everything that we have to do for our training. That line also covers our Bolo wrap, which is another tool that we have for de-escalation. It's similar to a taser, except it shoots like a string, and it wraps you up. So it's a less than lethal, and it also gives us some other use of force, other than, say, a baton or something like that, or a taser. And then ammo. Ammo's crazy. The prices for ammo are through the roof, and we qualify anywhere 2 to 4 times a year. And, I would like to do more, but it's expensive. So that's pretty much where all that money goes. Lastly is, I believe now, the police dues, which I already touched on, where the increase came from. And that is really my budget for right now. Until something gets settled, I'm up in the air.
And go to the next slide, please. What about the cruiser lease, Mark?
This is the last year for our cruiser lease.
Right.
So this is the third year for the cruiser lease. So once this is done, that will probably be my only capital project for the following year. We were lucky again this year to get a lot of grant money. Sergeant Thorpe has done an outstanding job over the last 5 years. I want to say he took in almost, he was awarded almost $250,000 in grant funding, which takes care of all of our specialty equipment. We were able to get 6 computers for the station. We were hoping to get more. It was just such a competitive grant that they did cut some of our funding for the computers. But we were able to get 6 computers for the PD that we don't have to now purchase, that were getting very outdated. Along with, I know we had capital items such as thermal imagers and license plate readers and laptops for the cruisers. We were able to fund all those items with grants that Sergeant Thorpe got. So there will be no coming to the town for capital items for equipment because we're able to get them through other funding sources.
Good.
So that really helped. Like I said, I want to give Sergeant Thorpe a pat on the back. He does great work, and that's a lot of money for a small town like Paxton to get over 5 years. So, I hope he continues to get awarded money, and we're going to continue to put in for whatever we can. But like I send it to the select board, but I would like the finance committee to know also the hard work that he does to try to keep our costs down.
So noted. So Mark, not on your budget at all, but every once in a while, the finance committee takes a walk by special revenue funds. And Anna Maria College
Yep.
is on that particular page. Can you give us a Reader's Digest version of how that works?
Sure. So, do you want to know how the AMC contract works? Or is there a specific area that you want me to touch on, or the whole thing?
How's the revenue and expense work?
Okay. We submit a budget every year to the school. I run it the same as I run the town budget. I watch it the same as I watch the town budget, and whatever's left at the end of the year, we go to the school, and we talk about, do you want to invest it into what we call professional development, and that can be used for training, that can be used for equipment, that can be used for anything that the school really needs, they put in a special account, so I don't have to go to them year after year. So if we're able to save money, it's up to the school if they want to do that. That was kind of talked about in our first contract 13 years ago, that it would be a revolving account that the school will determine if they want to invest in, and it can be used to do really anything. If I was ever short, I never go back to the school, it comes out of that money. So that's kind of how we run things now, and we've been running them for 13 years, and it seems to work. But again, it's one of those things that, it's like anywhere else, if times are tough, it's kind of a rainy day fund.
So higher education's getting beaten up a little bit, and demographics and enrollment declines and so on and so forth. What if they took a walk on this agreement? What would be the impact on your budget in the town?
Well, the impact on my police budget would be nothing, because Anna Maria pays 100% for their employees. So what Anna Maria pays for, they pay 100% for 6 full-time employees, plus 5 part-time employees, and they pay for their vacation, they pay for their health insurance, they pay for the retirement costs, they pay all of it. They also pay a portion of increased salary for myself, for the lieutenant, for 2 sergeants, and a detective. So they pick up the cost of that because with the college came extra work, and they understood that, so they picked up portions to offset costs. So those 6 employees really help us, especially now where we're down and we're short-staffed. We have the agreement that we can kind of utilize as we need. If we're running short in town, I can use a guy at the college if they have to go out and assist, and vice versa. You know, there's times I'm short up at the college. So if something big happens there, a guy from town slides up there. I look at it and I explain it as it's kind of just like a substation. That's all. You know, it's the same department, except instead of you in town, you're up at the college.
So your own complement of staff, are you full, down 2, down 1.5?
Right now, I'm currently down 2 positions, plus I have 1 in the academy. So realistically, 3.
So those budgeted in here, assuming they'll be filled?
They're in they're in the budget right now. Yeah, nothing came out of that budget.
Yeah.
It's, now it's just trying to find them. You know, that's the problem. We're picky,
Yeah,
you know, we're very fussy with who we want.
yeah.
They have to fit the mold. They have to fit the department. You know, we're a unique place. We're not like everywhere else. That's a unique agreement up at the college, and you have to get the right mindset to make sure that it all works. Because if you get somebody that doesn't fit our goals, you can really cause some damage with the relationships. So it's tough right now. It's tough everywhere. Everybody's looking for officers. We're all digging for the same pool. So it's
Yeah.
competitiveness now.
So the
See-
2 positions that are vacant right now, that people that left and took positions at other towns?
Correct. I lost 5 officers this year for other agencies. So it was, you know, it's been challenging. Obviously, we run short. It is what it is. You know, I can't fill every shift with overtime. There just wouldn't be enough. So we fill what we have to make sure that we have coverage here and we have officers to respond. But in a perfect world, I'd like to get those filled.
Yeah, is public safety at risk with them not being filled?
Right now, no. But, you know, we have officers here, and they're able to go out and patrol the town and keep the town safe. And, you know, if we lose more officers, well, then, you know, like anything else, it could create safety risks for my officers. You know, if you're running 3 guys or 4 guys a shift, and now you can only run 2, you know, safety for them is always my concern. And it's probably every chief and every resident's concern for police officers. It's a different time right now. It's not 20 years ago. Violence is at an all-time high, and Paxton's not immune. We're not immune to criminals coming here. They don't stop at the Worcester line and, you know, hey, we're in Paxton, let's turn around. You know, but I give the officers the credit, because they're out there, and if any of you drive around, you see a police car. They're stopping cars. They're out there. They're seeing their presence known. And believe me when I tell you, that word spreads.
Yeah.
You know, and it's totally the officers that are doing this. You know, we got a great group of guys here. And we were lucky that the ones that left were wonderful officers, and we were able to replace them with another group of great guys. So, you know, I've been blessed, and I hope that continues, and I'm hoping between the town and the union that we'll be able to get a agreement that works for them and keeps our officers here, so that I don't have to go through this thing next year.
Chief, is it possible, based upon the fact that you have such a relationship with Anna Marie and the people there,
Yep.
and that the officers there have kind of helped you out when you have a shortage, is that a possible pool for you to interview to fill the 2 positions you have in town? Is that an option?
Well, the officers that are up at the college are ours.
Okay,
There are officers.
Okay.
So that's, like I said, that's like a substation. So they work for the police department, they're town employees, but when they show up at work, they go to the college.
gotcha.
And they cover the college calls.
Okay,
And then we have town officers, same department, Same
So they're
everything.
included in your staff
Yeah.
and counts
Yeah.
and, yeah, okay, so you're still down to.
We're still down, yeah.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Chief, is there any way that you know why the officers left? Is there anything we can do about that?
I believe that honestly, the town right now is doing what they need to. And that's why they're working so hard to get a agreement with the union. But like I said, today's different than 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago. Everybody is short. No one wants to be a police officer anymore. So people will leave for $1 more. If you do not have a package that is competitive, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose to somebody that's right, I lost to area towns. They didn't drive very far. They went to 2 of our bordering towns, because they had a better package. Now, we all know that there's only so much money that can go around. But the days of seniority, and they'll give that up to make an extra couple dollars. So-
Hometown discount days are gone.
Yeah, it is, and when I started, I would never give up seniority. That was the biggest thing. Now, they don't care. They'll go back to nights. They can care less. If they can make a couple dollars more or get a better package, more time off or something. And like I said, I give the town credit because I think they recognize that and they're doing their best to address that issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How about regional dispatch? Is that you or Heather?
I'm happy to take the lead, and then the chief can fill in anything that I'm missing. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Do you have that?
I do.
Jeremy's
hold.
gonna pull it up on the screen.
Call's important to me.
So unlike the chief's budget, the regional dispatch did change since the original email out in December. And that was because we got the actual assessment in from Holden. So we've been working off of a little bit of a state 911 grant for the past few years. This is the last year of those grant fundings where they cover 75% of our assessment. And then next year, we go to 100% of the assessment is ours. So because it was only 75% of the assessment, our number that we're gonna be responsible for FY '25 is $98,625. And you see that in the assessment line, and the other line is purchase services. So what purchase services is we spend, I think there's actually a backup sheet on that. It's the next one there. It is the annual contract to handle dispatch, the fiber line between the two towns if there's any issues. So that runs us about 6,000. We used to round up to about 8,000. We haven't really been touching it, so I've been rounding down to about 7,000 to try to get that little bit of savings there. But I wouldn't touch it more than that. It's something we have to have in place if we're gonna continue to work with dispatch and Holden. We need to have that coverage if something happens. As far as the assessment goes, we don't have a lot of say over it. In fact, we have no say over it. Each of the towns that they contract with has an agreement. Each agreement is entirely different. Each agreement, language is entirely different. Terms of the contract, how to get out, how they base their amounts, all of those pieces. We've been working on this for, Chief, almost 2 years now?
Yes.
Pretty much since I got here. We tried to jump in, get into more details and so forth, and the details are not usually freely forthcoming. Would that be how you describe
Readily
it?
available.
Oh, there you go. Okay, readily available, that works too. So we don't have a lot of those details, but generally speaking, what they do with their calculations is they look at all of the towns. So we're with Holden, West Boylston, Princeton, and us. And they look at, sorry, I got the 2 sheets here. They look at calls and then they look at population. And so last year's population and the last year's calls. The chief has been working very hard internally within his department to modify certain things we do to amend what they call calls. What was happening is every time that our officers or an entry was made into the IMC system, Holden was considering it a call. So what happens is if you look at just the numbers, and this will show you the little bit of concern we have. So Holden, last year, they were showing numbers at 21,335 calls. Princeton, 10,376, West Boylston, 10,131, and Paxton, 11,603. So the 11,603, we already got down substantially from the year before, because we modified how we did some of our calls in, and we did more work on the officer side, which was a trade-off that, we have concerns about. But we did it to try to reduce some of the call volume. But that being said, it put us at 21.71% of the calls, which is puts us in second place to Holden's 39.92%. Well, West Boylston's bigger than us. Theoretically, they probably have more calls, but it depends on what they call calls. The beginning of the agreement, they talked about 911 calls, the initial agreements. The problem is, according to the state 911, when you talk to them, is they can't actually record that once you all go into a regional dispatch. So the state 911 calls, they can only delineate for one town if the only ones who are on the other side of that is the one town. Once you put them all into the regional dispatch, they can't delineate the state 911 calls between them. So they can't base it on that number anymore. And then they look at population, and they do a calculation, they call it a percentage by the 50-50 rule, and they figure out the numbers based on that. So our full assessment before you take that 25% off, for this year is 131,499, or 17.75% of the share for the 4 towns. The only other thing I think we know about the department is next year they are removing themselves from under the police department's wing and becoming their own department. Whether that saves costs, increases costs, or keeps costs the same, we are not sure of at this time. But it changes essentially the leadership hat, right? So instead of right now, if there's any issues in dispatch, it theoretically filters up to the police chief, because the police chief's head of the department. The dispatch communications director, is that what
Yes.
Dustin's title? Communications director will be the head of that department. What questions can I not answer for everyone?
So the 98,000,
Yes, that's 75% of the 131,499.
so next year is going to be 100%.
Yes, so next year, you figure the number's gonna be 139,499 times at least 3.5%.
So it's going to go up substantially next year for the final year. So it was 50% last year, 75% this year, 100% next year.
Correct. Doesn't go up to 125 though, so we're in luck.
In the first 3 years, we're 100%.
Yeah,
So
Right,
the
or
state
zero.
picked it up at 100%.
Right.
So then it kind of progressively went down.
Right.
If you don't mind, I can jump in. We're hoping that some of the modifications that we made will address these calls for service. Offices are actually, we enter them. So we enter the calls, but because it shows up in IMC, it's call for service. We don't use anything from them,
Yeah.
but we get billed from them. So we are modifying how we do business to hopefully bring those calls for service down. Next year, we'll see. We'll have to wait till the assessment comes out to see how much of a difference our new protocols and how we do it, if it made a difference or not. So,
Is that information collected just over a year basis, or can you get quarterly updates to kind of see if you're trending better?
Maybe Heather can get quarterly updates. It's a challenge sometimes to get the necessary
Referring to
information.
what you said earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a challenge, that's all, They're busy, like everybody else, and they usually come out around January is when the assessments come out?
I started requesting in November. I was told they don't get their budgets until December, and I got this number a week and a half ago when I emailed.
Yeah, so it's close.
February.
Not knowing any more than what I'm seeing on this, are we happy with the way this has gone versus
Our own.
our own?
I'm gonna just,
Okay, that's.
I'm gonna leave that one.
Well, so, okay, and again, I mean, so, second part of my question, how long are we tied into this?
It's 3, right?
Yeah, it's a 3-year opt-out.
Exit clause.
Exit clause. Now, what I will say is that there was a lot of things behind the scenes when we had our own that we wouldn't be able to fund. So there's a lot of good things that came from this. We updated a lot of our radios. That's millions of dollars. You know, we have equipment updates that was paid by the state. But we lost control, you know, and that's huge.
And at some point, does it become all the good things that you got for a value? Now, are we seeing that? Are we on the losing side of that? Is it going to continue to go on the losing side of that? Is there a point where you say, we've now broken even, or we've now received no benefit because this has gone up to, in 5 years, could be $200,000?
I think it would be safe to say at this point that we're reviewing and considering
Okay.
all options and reviewing everything that's currently available.
The biggest thing is you can never get it back. So we can never have our own dispatch again. So once they take, because the state wants everybody regional.
Sure.
So once they get it, you're never getting it back. So
What other options do you have beside the regional headed by, or with Holden? Is there another connecting that you're exploring?
there
Or
are
can you
other,
even share that?
there's other regionals in the area, but that would really come down to, you know, really what the select board in, you know, powers above me decide. You know, who answers our radios doesn't matter to us, you know, whether it was, you know, in Worcester or Holden. And in theory, a resident wouldn't know. When they pick up that phone, you would never know that Holden's answering it, or Worcester, or if it was Paxton. Same service. But, you know, with everything else, what I will say is that even if even if you're super happy with somewhere, it's always smart to see what else is out there if there's cost savings. But it's not as easy as, okay, maybe we want to try a different, you know, regional center.
Right.
There's a lot to it. And-
Right,
And it could
it's
take,
not just dollars and cents.
yeah,
There's
and
lots of factors.
there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of time. You know, even if the town decided, hey, we want to explore somewhere else, it could take years before you can even do that. So it's, you know, they are, you know, we always look at options, if that helps out at all with that answer, of trying to be somewhat politically correct.
You answered the question.
Yeah, I think we got our answer
Yep,
Yeah, we did.
without you answering it.
okay. Is there
Any other questions?
any other questions?
Mark, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Chief.
You know that if you have any questions, reach out anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is a reserve fund transfer request. Excuse me. That was sent to you, having to do with the town's server. And I think it speaks for itself. If this server is not functional and we don't have it, we're in some deep trouble. So,
I just, if I may, have just one question. It talks about the physical hardware. I'm assuming the server's gonna be totally configured with the software, et cetera, to where it's totally functioned. And that cost that's reflected here, the $47.95, includes that total configuration?
Yeah, I believe so there's some software with it, but for the most part, it's a good portion of the hardware component.
Right, I
Right, so
understand.
replacing that, but yes, because we operate on a full cover, let me restate this. To the best of my knowledge, I was not involved in this discussion. I haven't had a meeting with IT yet, so I apologize if I'm misstating anything, but to my understanding, because we have a regular agreement with Suzer IT to cover us for whatever our IT service needs are, they'll provide the migration from our current server over to the new server, including all the configuration within the cost we already pay as an annual
Thank you,
agreement.
that's what I wanted to know. What I didn't wanna, asking the question a different way, you coming back next week and saying, guess what? There's now $1,200 more that needs to be accounted for the new server because we didn't have software included.
My understanding is everything should be included.
Thank you.
Again, I sincerely apologize if I misspeak, but that's my understanding and impression from everything I've,
So this
Been
is
read
a
on.
refurbished server.
yes.
The other option was a new server, which
Yes.
was, I believe, $17,000.
Yes. So we've
That's
had,
not before us, but that was
no,
a consideration. And the decision at the time was this was going to buy us three years.
Well, I was gonna say, that was my next question. How old is the server, do we know?
it's very old.
And
It's
does it
old,
come-
it's older than the expected lifespan by 2 or 3 times.
Right.
So I think it's 10, 15, Carol, do you happen to
I
remember?
thought it was 2012 when we got it, but I might be wrong.
So it's exceeded its expected lifespan by a few multiples.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 3 to 5 years,
Yeah.
and you're saying it's 12 years old.
That's Carol's
That's what I
recollection,
thought.
yes.
Okay. And what is the term of the agreement that in this acquisition, is there some sort of coverage for a number of years? Is it just 1 year included? What is, as far as maintenance, et cetera?
So I can't tell you on the warranty for the actual hardware. Again, we have Suzer IT, so if something goes awry, they'll resolve the issue. The goal is to, as far as I understand, sustain us as long as we can, and so we can continue to migrate things. A lot of things have moved to the cloud. We have some things that still need to, some things that, we have to untangle to be able to do so.
Yep.
So this gives us what we believe is the time needed to be able to finish that migration. So the hope is in 3 years, Steve, we don't even need the server.
Understood.
In the cloud.
In the
Yes,
cloud.
I had an assistant who used to say, Heather, something's wrong, it must be raining in the cloud. But it's gotten way better over the years, so not to scare anybody.
So is there a motion
So moved.
to approve?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the approving of this reserve fund transfer?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The request passes. Good. So, might go off script a little bit on the next item, which is on our agenda, which is discussion of the proposed budget consideration use of free cash. As it turns out, when Heather left, we had I think a $571,000 deficit, give or take, just talking generalities here. And then there was some discussions in your absence that I think brought that deficit to $633,000, again, kind of in generalities. There was also a number of times we've talked about free cash. And this is not official, it may not be perfect in every way, but the concept is perfect in every way, and that's the 6-year history of our free cash that we've used for balancing the budget. And as you can see, it's pretty substantial. And had we not used that free cash to balance the budget, then we would have had to cut the budget, done something on revenue, or maybe had an override. So, in kind of an analysis here, I'm just, for simple math purposes, using $500,000 as the basis of discussion. And while I don't have the full text, I refer you to the fact that we have financial management policies, one in particular, A5 on financial reserves, which basically speaks to the fact that the town should have a 10-year plan to rid itself of using free cash to balance the budget. And I'm just putting up on the slide for you here, what that would involve. If we were to do it this year, then we would only use 450,000 of the free cash that we have, and the next year only 400, and the next year 350, all the way to year 10, where we would finally rid ourselves of using free cash. The good news is that would comply with the policy that's in place. The bad news is it puts significant budget pressure on preparing a budget, because we're not going to use that money for free cash. So I'm not advocating that we do or not doing this. I'm just advocating that we know about it and talk about it as to what is going to be our overt decision to take a pass again this year. Not that this is in stone, but the the financial management policies were in effect in 2022, and this is 2024, so we've already taken a pass on implementing that 10-year plan, 2 of those 10 years. And if there's interest in making it more aggressive to get away from relying on free cash, and we do it over a 5-year plan, then the impact of this year's budget is even worse. If we extend it over 20 years, which is neither of which is what the financial management policies say, so the question is, what are we going to do about this? There was some alluding to the fact that we should do it this year in total, in which case our deficit would be $1 million. Not advocating that, just sharing with you some other discussions. So I don't think it's for decision tonight. It could certainly be for a discussion tonight, but for decision maybe at another meeting. But what do we want to do about this? Because we've got a substantial deficit by using all of the free cash this year. And if we chip into that, then that's going to exacerbate the deficit problem. So not for me to say, but not for me to decide, but thought I'd put that out there for you to chew on and think about and maybe ask some questions. Heather, you look like you're ready to jump in and speak to that point, which I'd certainly welcome.
I could speak to it, Mark, but I think at this point it's probably, I think I can come back to it as we go down further on the agenda.
Right.
I think it's all going to be related.
Right, right. But I think the value of this is if anybody would say, well, what are we talking about here? I thought free cash was free. What's the deal here? It's the huge benefit that if you scroll to the top, Jeremy, I mean, we've balanced the budget over the last 6 years by using that. And this year it's only 517, and we still have a $633,000 deficit. That's basically the message. Maybe a dire message, but that's basically the message. So that's.
Hasn't the position of the direness already been stated by what was posted on the Paxton website by the Select Board? A call for, an alert to the population of Paxton regarding an override?
I go back to, your point's well made, I go back to Heather's well-made point. It's all going to be involved in this whole stew that we're gonna make. So, is the override, 100,000, 300,000, or even bigger? Because what is not shown up here is that the goal would be to take this particular money, whatever it happens to be, and put it in your capital depreciation and your stabilization fund. Right now, our capital depreciation fund, I think, has $37,000. I remarked the other night that you can't buy a fire hose with that. So if we were to build that, so there's a plus side to setting this aside and taking it out of the budget equation, in that it's put in certain reserve funds. We're not letting a match to it and getting rid of it, so, but again, something to think. It's a bigger issue than this evening, but I think it's got to be part of the whole discussion going forward. That was a mere attempt at that, so. Any thoughts, questions? Okay. So now the next item on the docket is, going back to my earlier point, that at one time we had a $571,000 deficit. It's grown a little bit. And Heather, you've only been here for 3 days, but I guess the question is, can you add to any of that in terms of where we are or where we're headed?
Yeah, so I did send, I don't know if you got it, Mark, I did send you a memo last night. It was late, it was like 9:43. I forwarded it to Jeremy. It's the complete memo document. Do you see that?
I see, yes, FinCom memo?
Yeah.
Open that.
Yes, please. So this is from what I've been able to put together over the past 2 days. I did come across a couple of Charlie's documents, so my numbers are already gonna be off, because there's things, if they weren't incorporated directly into the Excel sheet, I didn't see them, and incorporate them. So you see in the first paragraph, just to summarize here, so as of today, as of yesterday, the expenses were 16,663,968 with a revenue of 16,010,563, and the current deficit at last night was 653,000. So a couple major pieces to target here. Actually, we'll go in order. Revenues. Jeremy, can you go back to the Excel sheet that you were just at, please? For revenues.
Working budget?
Nope, the FY25 revenue, up top right. Thank you. So Mark did ask me to do year-to-date. So I was able to go in and local receipts do year-to-date. A lot of the other things, like, property taxes and so forth, you're not going to get as much of a comprehensive look on those pieces. So right here, what you have is FY25 estimated. I did make a couple changes. They were very minor changes, but some things to look at. So if you scroll down, Jeremy, first, I'll just tackle state aid. So state aid numbers changed from the original estimated numbers we had in December to the governor's budget. If you remember last year, the governor's budget came out with numbers, and the state and the House and Senate ended up increasing those numbers. This year, the governor's numbers were higher than we had projected, so it was kind of the opposite. But based on the current revenue forecast and the current state budget, I don't know if that's necessarily going to stay. That being said, overall, you'll see my number right there, reduced by, so after everything was updated and the governor increased our unrestricted governmental aid, they also decreased the state-owned land number. They decreased the veterans benefit reimbursements. They decreased the veteran, blind, elderly exemptions. And they, decreased the public library offset, which washes anyway for us. But they did increase our state assessments. So at the end of the day, this actually puts us $1,740 less than what I had estimated back in December. So local receipts is already lower, or state aid's already lower, my apologies. All right, if you scroll down, Jeremy, please, yep, thank you very much. So under this, let me just pull my memo up here so I can follow along. So local receipts revenue. So what I had done is I'd gone in, I looked at everything we had there, and I compared it to year to date. The other taxes and excise, I don't believe I did too much on that. Jeremy, can you push?
Freeze the top column.
No, go down. So those blue columns are all hyperlinks. So if you can, yeah, there you go. So you see right there, I did year to date. So motor vehicle excise, we currently estimated for this year 705, next year 715. Remember, the bulk of those don't come until March. The revenues I currently have that Larissa had updated is December 31st. So what you're seeing here is whenever there's a year-to-date in the local receipts, you're seeing the first half of the fiscal year, which is good because it's a nice way to compare the full year. The thing you have to remember is some things are due at different times of the year, so they may not yet be reflected. That being said, the meals excise is currently at 16,654. This year, we estimated 28, so hopefully, you know, that looks like that'll be in line. It should match up just fine. We should make more than the 28. Next year, I did up it to 32, which was the number I had in December, which is just about, you know, a little bit less than what 50% would be, but you still want to make sure that your revenues, to a certain extent, are somewhat conservative because you need to generate free cash. And if your expenses are to the penny of what you're going to expend, then you're not going to generate free cash on the expense side. So you need to have a healthy something coming in, even if it's only a couple thousand here and there. And Jeremy, if you click summary, it'll pop us back. Or you could do that too. All right, so the next one down, you could do
I
that.
can just click them on the bottom.
No, whatever floats your boat. Penalties and interest on taxes. So you see right here, here's our numbers lining up on the right-hand side. Interest, real and personal property was 5,119. Running a little low right now on that. Interest motor vehicle, 2,621, just about on, a little bit over the mark. And interest on tax takings, we don't always know what's gonna be there, so we don't usually budget for. And you can see from years past, that number fluctuates anywhere from $422 to $23K. So it's something we don't usually estimate because we don't really know. Next one, please. Pilots. So these are payment in lieu of taxes agreements with Leicester and Worcester. These are things that are already set out. We have the specifics of how we get to those numbers after we spent a lot of time researching them last year to figure it all out and put it in here. So those are the numbers based on everything we know of what we expect to get for next year. I don't have year-to-date on those because we just sent out the bills, so I don't think the numbers were collected until February for the amounts. Trash fee, yep, trash fees, so this is just the wash, right? So this is one we talked about, waste management. We try to make sure that we're charging enough for the service to be able to pay for it because we don't want it to have to fall on the rest of the general fund, and we don't want to run a deficit. And we also have to be careful, you know, we really shouldn't be making extra funds on it either. So we try to just balance it out so it's where it needs to be. Year to date, we're doing okay. Our expenses are running a little bit higher than we expected. So we're hoping those kind of curve back down. And we are looking for next year. I talked to Cheryl today about talking to the Board of Health about whether it made sense to increase the rate next year for about 50 cents a month per user, 50 cents to $1, to be able to cover for increase in cost, mileage, anything else that we're incurring, including waste disposal, always seems to be going up. But again, the trash line's nice, it's just a wash. So whatever we expect in revenues, or expenses rather, we budgeted in revenues to offset the two. So they could both be zero, both be $1 million, and it's not gonna impact the rest of the budget. Yes, please. Fees. So I did year-to-date again here, Mark. So you see FY '24 estimated is column F, and then G is FY '25 expected. A lot of times they keep the number about the same. Town clerk right now is 1,175, so we're doing okay. You know, that's a little bit more than halfway through the numbers. Dog licenses are low, but again, dog licenses aren't due until this part of the fiscal year.
Correct.
So, you know, that number won't catch up for a few more months. Collector fees, you know, those all depend on who's, you know, buying, selling houses, transferring, so forth, refinancing. The abutters list, we don't really budget for that because that's one of those things you could have $0 or you could have $485 at the end of the day. It just depends based on how many people are coming in and requesting a hard copy of the list. Treasurer's office, they're currently at 12,053. That's less than 50% of the 28, so hopefully we'll get to that 28 number. Conservation advertising fees, we are at 175 again. That's one of those things that kind of varies. Planning board, we expected 1,000. We're at 2,042. Again, you'll see that ranges from 1,000 up to 8,586. It just depends on the activity that comes in. You know, if you have subdivisions, A&Rs, whatever it is, with the different fees attached to it. You know, for instance, AMC doing all of their work, they're paying fees to the planning board for various plans and so forth, so that's driving some of that number, but we don't know year to year, so we don't budget high on that. ZBA, you have years you could be 0, you have years it could be 1250. We're at 400 so far. We usually budget that 0. Police department, they're doing okay at 1300. And then fire department is at 1457. We've had years where it was $20. Next, sir, please. Rentals, this is our $4,000 every year with 10 West. It was less money that one year because we had an agreement with them where they had to purchase an item for their, the building that they ended up paying, and we reimbursed by waiving the rent for a few months. Cemeteries, so I did check on this number. I actually reduced it from the 15,000. Right now, we're only at 4,000. I had Tiffany and Donna work to pull, it has to do with when not selling the plot for burial, right? That goes into the perpetual care and those lines over there in your special revenue funds. This has to do with opening the site, right? So you could open the site for cremation, you could open the site for regular burial. You have during the day burial, like during the regular weekday burials, and then you have the weekend burials, which have different costs. So based on the estimates I looked at, I had Donna go through and pull for me the number of cremations during the week versus the weekends, regular burials and so forth, and as you know, that kind of varies. We've had, 21 and 22, we had a lot. Then it slowed down since then. And right now, we're only at 4,000. I think that totaled about 7 burials thus far when I looked at the numbers. So even at 14, that's less than the 15,000 that we put there. So we'll see where those numbers come. This is one of those lines we actually hope we don't collect, right? It's not, one of those things we want to do. Building, so building's doing pretty well, as we've talked about in the past. It's one of those things that kind of fluctuates year to year, and we don't really know what the economy's doing all the time. In '24, we budgeted for 25,000, so we should hit that. In '23, we hit $30,090. We budgeted $30,000. We just cleared it. Building is also a good one where a lot of times it will generate some free cash for us. So we try to budget a conservative number, and then we're excited when we exceed that number. Licenses and permits. So here, select board at this point, 5,950. We're pretty much done, the permitting through the select board this year, so it's anything new that comes on. If there's a new liquor license or one-day permits we started doing, we charge for that starting this year with AMC. We've been making a few $100 extra through that. Board of Appeals, hit or miss. Police Department, 1,600, so they're doing okay there. Fire Department, plumbing permits. So the thing to keep in mind about plumbing and electrical. So if you remember last year, I talked about a potential revolving fund. My purpose was because we pay them when they do the work, and they do the work when we get paid, right? So the two things go in hand, but they're variable. We could have a lot of plumbing permits, and we pay a lot of inspector fees to go with the plumbing permits. We could have a few plumbing permits, and we pay a little bit in the plumbing inspector fees, right? They pay per service. We upped our fees this year to balance it out, also to give them raises, to get them closer to where other communities are, and also to make it still beneficial for them to go and provide this service for us. So those numbers have been doing a little bit better, but you'll also see we try to calculate, over the past couple of years. Cheryl will go in and she'll look at how many plumbing permits, how many inspections the plumbing inspector did over the last couple of years. We try to average that out. We know how much he gets paid. It shows up in the expense side. We know it's about $25,000 more on the revenue side, so we take that same number and we do those two pieces. So this number is usually always still higher than what the expense is going to be for plumbing and electrical inspector. But they're kind of a little bit fluid on those pieces. DPW permits, we don't budget for that one. We just put it in as it goes. And Board of Health is currently at $6,135, which puts us just about 50%. Remember, they have a lot of their food permits. They come out certain times a year and so forth. So I imagine that number will go up a little bit. Fines and forfeits, same thing here. Court fees fines completely dependent year to year. Dog fines, we usually have some routine offenders, we'll say. Otherwise, it just depends. And library fines, they don't really do anymore. And parking fines, I haven't seen anything in 2 years, but it's possible they're still happening. Investment income. So this is one of these ones that is really good for generating our free cash. The Division of Local Services and DORs advise, treasurer and collectors not to go much higher than the current numbers they have, even though we're doing really well. We had a really wise treasurer collector who did a great job with renegotiating some of the rates with some of the banks to get us better interest rates when the interest rates took a turn for the good in our eyes. And as such, halfway through the year, we're already at almost $30,000 for investment income. That being said, you never know when it's going to drop, as well as we have very limited opportunities with our current budget structure to generate free cash, and this is when those nice ones will generate. I did increase this from December's number of 10,000 up to 15,000. I know that still seems low, but we're trying to be conservative on that end and also heed the advice of DOR. Miscellaneous. So there's two different categories of miscellaneous. There's miscellaneous, so things that don't fall in the other categories, but they occur every year. And then there's miscellaneous non-recurring. So the miscellaneous one, we have a Wachusett Regional School District maintenance agreement, so they pay us a certain amount of money every year. That comes in, and that is contracted for. And then we also have the teacher retirement, so that is the wash from the cherry sheet assessments as of right now. So once upon a time, before the school was part of the regional district, as I understand it, the teachers may have retired, and we were on the hook for their retirement. And then, the regional district took over, and they kind of got more involved. And we've been getting back from the regional district reimbursed for the teacher retirement that were charged on the state assessments of the part of the cherry sheet. So that's usually a wash. As of right now, they continue to reimburse us for that, and that's a number we can't really figure ahead of time or guess. We go with the number they give us, and we put it in. And then recreation, if you remember last year, we started getting a portion of the recreation director's benefits back to us from the revolving fund. A small percentage of her salary was charged there, as well as a small percentage of the benefits and so forth came out of that. That's what that line is. Non-recurring. So non-recurring changes year to year. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's not. If we have surplus items, they always go here. This is one of those items, though, that the state does not allow us to budget for. So even if we know we have an item we're going to sell next year and we know it's going to go for 10,000, we can't anticipate it. They require us to let it come in, and then it flows over to free cash. So anything that shows up here has contributed to your free cash calculations in the past years, where they show. All right. Is that what you were looking for, Mark, with year-to-date?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And then down below, there's just the other funds which you have. Everything is still the same as what it was previously in December. At the end of the day, I think the whopping change in the revenues, I don't even know if I have the number. I do not, but it was did I make a note there? Did not, Jeremy. Okay. The number was very low. I think it was like $2,000 higher than what it was at the end of the day in December. So, any revenue questions I can answer?
I'll forward that to everybody. I was, I did get it at 9:45, but I was under the weather last night, so
You sound like you're under the weather now.
a little bit. So I'll forward it to everybody tomorrow. So,
Okay.
good.
All right, so expenditures. So if you go back to that memo, Jeremy, if you'd be so kind. I just walked through some updates of major changes. So big ticket items, right? So the major changes we've had since the December budget, and we already talked about the first one, regional dispatch. So it decreased from my anticipated number by 10,196, so that's good, right? But I guessed too high, always a good thing. The next one was Bay Path. So Bay Path traditionally, for the past couple of years, if you look at the numbers, Jeremy, can you pull up the expense sheet for a moment for me, please?
Where was that in the email?
Yeah, it's gonna be in the email, it's gonna be the Excel for expenses. Yep. Yep,
Which one?
that one.
This one?
And then if you go to the very first sheet, so it might show up on the second sheet, but you wanna go to the first sheet when it comes to fruition there. If you go up to the top and all the way up to the top to the right, sorry,
gotta-
click 1210 up at the top, I can shortcut you. All the way to right, expense details. Okay, and then go one sheet to the left of that. All the way down the left, arrow. Yep, and expense sum. Yeah, and then it's gonna be, I think, 301, 310 is the code number. Schools, it's a separate color, so scroll up. Scroll down a little bit, it's after green, after blue, up, there you go,
There it is.
light orange.
1310.
13.
Oh, 1310, okay, there you go. So 1310, so you do have some, up top, oh, I don't know if I have those other, I may not have the historical data. Okay, but you see how let's see, FY '22's actual was that 438?
FY '23, yeah.
Then it went to 498?
Yeah.
Now this year it's 590. Okay, and keep in mind that there is the excluded debt as part of that. And the excluded debt's easy because that's a wash, right? It shows up in our revenue side, it shows up in the expense side, that piece washes. But the rest of the number is the increase. So it came out to about a 17% increase. I don't think you have, I'm just gonna see if I can pull up my number and my budget forecast. But the numbers have, over the past several years, consistently gone up. I budgeted at a much lower percentage increase, being ridiculously hopeful at 3%, but they have not come in at 3%.
Did we have a skyrocketing number of students attending?
I can pull the memo and see, Jeremy, I haven't had a chance to dig that deep yet.
The other question I would have, Heather, is that number now a hard and fast number?
Usually, they give us that number and it doesn't change. It hasn't changed usually when they give it to you, Carol, right? No. It's usually their final, this is where we're at.
Okay.
Did they give you an explanation?
They sent a lovely memo, Dee. They always send a memo.
Definitely increase students, and at some point that maxes out, I assume, too. You can't send an infinite number to
No.
each district, but.
So I just want to make sure people aren't shocked
So
by
we're
the
up
increase.
20%.
Exactly.
So
We have a 20% increase in
17.
17.
So in FY '20, the number was 279, and FY '21 actually went down to 249. FY '22, it went back up 70,000 to 319,000. In FY '23, the actual was 438,000. And then it went up another 60,000 this past year to 498.
So this has doubled in 5 years.
So it keeps going up. Now, I don't have many of the details. I have the memo from them, and I have to be honest, I haven't had a few free minutes to read it in depth. So I'm happy to, copy it and send it along to people, and I imagine they'll bring it on
They're
the
coming
11th
on
as well,
the 11th.
when they do their meeting.
They're presenting to the select board March 11th.
Yes, they are. So you can ask those questions.
We'll send out a meeting notice for us to join. So the questions you have, in addition to the memo, can be posed that evening,
Okay, so,
but it is 20%.
so Jeremy, if you can throw 17% increase. Were you saying 20% something else, Mark? Or just increase?
Round it up.
Oh, you rounded up, okay.
I like even numbers. Where do
If
we
you
go?
throw back up Adobe. PDF, yep. There you go, okay. So then the next item we have here is employee benefits. So I had estimated a higher number based on what we were looking at for health insurance. We thought it was gonna be 10+% increase. It was only 8.58%. So the number came in about 112,000 lower than what I had, so that's always a good thing. And then retirement, the figure I had actually came in, the final figure came in 14,000 lower than what I had. So those are good things. Continued uncertainties. Town insurance, those numbers are still only estimates. We don't have the final numbers for Maya. That's, liability insurance, cyber insurance, injured on duty, workers' comp, those pieces. We got decent estimates from Maya of what they thought the increases were gonna be, but just as your auto insurance, your home insurance, and every other insurance anyone has skyrocketed this year, they anticipate, that those are gonna carry over as well. So we'll see how that impacts us. But hopefully our numbers are pretty close to what they need to be. Police department, as the chief had talked about earlier, we don't have those numbers until the CBA. We're doing everything we can to try to come to a agreement as soon as possible. We were hopeful that we would have one for tonight, but unfortunately we don't. So we're still working on that piece. Other changes, here, the assessors, we just had an adjustment. I wrote 700, I was apparently incorrect at 750. Treasurer collectors went up $97 and town clerk 50. So those are minor changes since December. The only one I don't have on here is probably marked because it was 9:43 or something last night as the school, right? Wachusett Regional School District's presenting their budget tomorrow. We did meet town administrators, town managers with the superintendent yesterday. They were still diligently working to reduce the budget, to continue to decrease it. At this point, I have it in there as a 5% increase. I don't know, based on conversations, if that's going to be enough. It might need to be high, it might end up being higher than 5%. That being said, I can tell you then, talking to the other communities yesterday, based on where the current numbers were, or the unknown, but based on what everyone had budgeted, everyone else seemed to be okay with not having to need an override to cover the cost. That being said, depending on how high it goes up, that could change it, and then it changes the, success rate of a passage of a school budget and so forth. So those are other pieces. So, any questions on the changes since December that I can?
Heather, Wachusett Regional, I thought, because I got a copy of it, I thought the town of Holden drew a line in the sand that it was gonna be 3.2%. That's all that they could subsidize, not, if I heard you correctly, now there's indication that they could withstand 5% without an override?
I don't know what they can sustain, Mark. I just know that people yesterday spoke about the numbers they currently had on their budget they could manage. And I think there's some possibility that the ultimate impact on the department, on the towns, is going to be north of 5%.
What did we budget, what did we estimate?
Well, back in December, Mark asked me to go with 3%, even though my projections are all 5. Just make sure I get credit for that one, right?
And that 2% translates roughly to how much money?
So each percent is, I want to say
75,000?
72,000.
So you're talking about $145,000 between 3 and 5%.
But mind you, we're now budgeted at 5, so it goes above that. Just keep adding 72 every time there's a 1% increase.
Understood.
So
Yep.
just add that to the deficit.
Which right now, based on everything you've put down, with the exception of, as you pointed out, the continual uncertainties. You're at 631,
653.
653. And that's with a conservative estimate for the regional school district
At 5%, yeah,
and these unknowns.
yeah.
So realistically, we're looking at 750 and north.
I would say that's potentially a safe bet, but we'll know more tomorrow once they have their finalized numbers. We're trying to get them, but they have been seeming to all work. They also have whatever Mark has or had. Everyone seemed to be sick in that building recently, so.
Maybe it's because they were looking at their budget.
It also should be pointed out, that's without the unknowns, right? That's what you know today.
Yeah, the 653
That's not with
is-
any of us, including yourself, being part of like we did tonight with the police chief, walking through a budget and discovering and not discovering things.
Right.
So that number could also change.
It could.
And they're presenting to the select board on March 25th. Yep. So we got March 11th and March 25th with the schools.
Okay,
And our number right now for free cash is what?
517, I want to
17.
say.
Right.
So, but mind you, that deficit includes the free cash offset. It includes 400,000 ambulance receipts reserved offset. Those haven't been pulled out. That deficit includes those offsets.
right,
So if you take the 400,000 off, you just go up to $1 million.
Two.
150,
$1.2 million.
million, yeah.
So, and keep in mind, I know I said I would address this later, Mark, maybe I'll tap on it real quick now. But keep in mind that, one of the signs that, we need to potentially look at doing an override is when you start using all of your reserves, right? We're at capacity with our free cash. We're at capacity with ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. We tapped into operating stabilization last year. Like, we've tapped everything we can, which shows us as a town, we need to look at things close as we can, and we also need to consider, do we need to go for an override to refresh and restart things so that we can continue moving? Reset the mark.
Okay. You good with this?
Don't you like my flowers?
I can't stop staring at them. Wonderful.
What's the chances that ambulance receipts would be reduced from 400,000?
That was a conversation FinCom had last year with the fire chief.
Right.
I don't know Mark, do you have the special
I got it.
revenue sheet?
Yeah.
Because you'll be able to know what the current balance is in it today.
It's up there.
But keep in mind
Six something.
that it's been doing really well over the past
It
couple
has.
years because we've been covering calls for Worcester.
526, 105.
And those calls have started to drop because Worcester's got their stuff in gear and they've started to, UMass is covering their own calls more and more. So our mutual aid calls that we were pulling in funds for have started to slow down. And fire calls have even picked up. Well, we don't get reimbursed for fire calls. We
Right.
get the funding for the ambulance calls.
Right.
So even if we're using a higher number, just keep in mind at some point, the well will dry and you won't be able to continue sustaining. And my only other comment on free cash is, if you look at Mark's 10-year estimate, that's assuming we're getting the same amount of free cash every year. The tighter and tighter budgets get, the less and less free cash you're gonna generate. The higher numbers you use as the base for your budget and local receipts and so forth, the less free cash you're gonna generate. So at the end of the day, tighter budgets, less generation of free cash, you're gonna have a smaller free cash number unless you get lucky with one-time things, selling surplus things, tax title, property coming in, what have you. That number's gonna continue to diminish before you even try to pull money out of it.
Looking at this, just real quick, special revenue fund. So if this is halfway through the year, you've taken in 240. You say that, to me, is not slowing. That's,
So you have to keep in mind, Jeremy, that billing's behind.
no,
So
I
that-
appreciate, okay.
So some of that was probably still from the last fiscal
Okay,
year.
so there's a lag between collections and billings. Other question is, when you look at the 404 in expenses, is that 400 that we took for the budget?
Yes.
That puts things into perspective, right? So that's a big expense, but that's the expense that was used towards the budget. Okay, thank you.
And
What's
then
the rev-
any more super specific questions, the fire chief can do a
Yep.
much more detail. I only can do high level on that fund.
So just to go back to Steve's point, which I don't think was lost on anybody, we're at 653. With the suggestion that Worcester Regional School District is gonna go higher. That's by using all of the free cash in the budget and not doing any of that 10-year plan. And that includes $400,000 of ambulance receipts, which went from 300 to 400 last year.
I think it was 310 to 4, but
Yeah, you're right, 310 to 4. It was a big jump. So you take those three out, or you add those three in, I don't know which it is, then the deficit
It's
is
1.3.
$750,000.
How do you figure? What's the deficit right now?
653.
and remember, that also doesn't include the collective bargaining for the police, which you know is gonna be at least 25,000,
Okay, so
because
put it
even
at
if they
7.
carry forward.
So say 7, worst case scenario, right? Say, we're at 40, okay? So 700,000, that includes 400,000 from the ambulance fund?
Yes.
That includes us using 400,000?
Yeah, if you pull
So
up
without
that,
it, you'd be at 1.1 million? Mm-hmm. Okay, now what about the free cash? Is that included in it?
yeah, so if you go
How
back
much
to
is the
that
free how much was the free?
517.
17.
So I'm at 1.7.
So if you go back to the revenue sheet, Jeremy,
Put your
Yeah.
pencil down.
if,
you're
if
making
you
it
go
worse.
back, you can always play, Mark will send out the packet of stuff, so everyone will have the Excel sheet. So if you guys are bored and if you have free time, call me. But if you're bored,
Oh, I personally would like the Excel spreadsheets.
so once you get into that though, you can play with it. You can go into the revenue sheet, take out zero
Yeah,
out free cash,
sure.
zero out that,
Okay.
take your bottom total, go back over to the expense sheet, plug in your bottom total, and it'll tell you the deficit.
Because last year, when we did budget, we were at a 500 and change.
Yeah.
We had to work with.
Right.
And we worked with, okay, I got it. Okay.
All right, so 1,200,000, 1,700,000, those are just numbers we're throwing out because a lot of unknowns are still.
Yep,
out
yeah,
of
there's
date.
still some stuff that needs to be said.
But it's a big number.
It's a big
It's a
number.
big number.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a big number.
So now here's an important
So-
thing to consider. So if the town is going to do an override, right? And if
Yep.
we are going to use the regular local election that is scheduled for May 13th, it's a week after the,
Second Monday.
yeah, so I believe it's May 13th, right? The drop dead deadline to have a number and the article to the town clerk to print is April 8th at 5 PM. So that means that the deficit number, if there's going to be an override, needs to be agreed upon by FinCom and the Select Board prior to April 8th at 5
Right.
PM.
But at the same time, you don't expect an override to just solely cover the deficit to $1,
So,
because you're gonna be doing this again next.
so, but that's part of the discussion, right?
Right.
So the
It's a lot of
determination-
discussions to have in the next,
But
35
also remember,
days.
you told us you have no ETA on when the collective bargaining agreement, it could be 30 days.
That's true.
30 days
That's only-
gives us exactly 1 week to have a discussion to nail what the final figure is for the override. That seems almost unrealistic.
So sometimes what ends up happening with collective bargaining agreements is you have to go back to a town meeting, special town meeting, because it's not resolved prior to your town meeting, and it's not done timely,
Okay.
right? And it has to wait, and you have to go back. Sometimes the town will have a different account, and they'll just put money for when there's multiple contracts to negotiate, but we're too small. It's only, when,
All right.
you don't want to give away.
Hypothetically, we all agree by April 8th, the number is $1.763 million override.
Whatever.
We all sign off on it.
Yep.
Define for me next steps. What happens then?
So in order to get an override to pass, you have to have 2 votes. One has to be at the ballot, one has to be at town meeting. Does not matter which order they happen in, and if one fails, you can always go back for that one after the other one succeeds. It doesn't matter, it just has to be within, I think it, dear Carol, do you remember, is it 60 or, it used to be 60 or 90 days between the
That
two?
was 90.
90. So you have to have 2 yes votes within 90 days. Doesn't matter which order, it could be the ballot, it could be the town meeting, could be vice versa. One could
Is
say
that a
yes.
simple majority, yes?
Yep, 51%. So you need those 2 yes votes within that 90-day window period. So for right now, for what our setup is we have the annual town meeting first on the 6th, and then we have the annual town election on the 13th. If the annual town meeting passes and the election fails, then the town would have the ability to call another election if they so chose. And they could do, election after election within that 90 days. As long as the 2 yes votes are within 90 days, that first yes vote stays. If you exceed that 90-day window before you get a second yes vote and you still want to go back, now you need to do both votes again to do it. You have to be certain what your number is when you go to the ballot, because that's the number you can't change. Remember, when you go to town meeting, it's always easy, right? Like, if you make a number error or something changes and you can reduce the number, you can reduce it on the floor. But once you do the ballot, you know, that's the number you're at. If you say $10 and you really meant 12, you're at 10. If you said 10 and you really meant 8, you're at 10. So you have to have as much certainty as you can have with those numbers.
Understood. All right, so now it passes both.
Yep.
What's next?
So if it passes both, then that budget is what goes into effect on July 1st, and when the tax rate is set, that is the calculated number that they use as the base when everything gets certified in the fall.
To cover the 1.7 million override. The tax base is adjusted to cover that to.
Yeah, it's assessed and broken out,
Right.
yeah.
Max being 2.5% to every taxpayer, correct?
It's not how the 2.5% has nothing to do with the price of eggs
And
in
it doesn't
China.
ever go away either.
That's what
The
the override is, to
The
allow you to
2.5%.
go
Override
of
the 2.5%.
Got it.
So Jeremy, can you pull up the revenue sheet for me real quick? Green one, Excel. Thank you. Scroll all the way to the top if you would kindly. So what happens every year? You see how it says prior year levy limit? So that number there is the addition of the prior year. So when you're looking at FY '25, Jeremy, can you just highlight a couple cells for me?
Sure.
So can you highlight I-5 down through I-8, please? Okay.
You want them colored?
If you want, it doesn't matter to me. It's fine either way. So those are the cells you use when you calculate the next year's prior year levy limit. So when moving forward, that levy limit would be, let's say it's $1 million override, right? So you would see for FY '25, there would actually be a section, instead of saying capital excluded, numbers down below, it would say, you know, we would do for that 1 year, we would tag it in, the override was $1 million, right? And then when we go to calculate the next year, so say FY '25 is FY '26, that number will be added. So it'd be the 11,679,950 plus 1 million plus 291,999 plus 80,000, and that will be the starting point. The 2.5% comes in the line I-7. See that there, it's a 2.5% increase over the prior year's levy limit. So when you go into '26, the 2.5% would be on the,
291,999.
yeah, the 11,769, nope, it would be on the 11,679 plus the million, plus the 291, plus the 80,000.
Okay, the 1 through 7, okay.
Yes, that all gets added in, and then they do the 2.5, but that's what the 2.5% is, right? It says you can only raise taxes. If you want to raise more than that, you can within certain parameters, but you have to go back to the people for an override.
Okay.
And that's what we're proposing. D. Carol, any thought, did I get that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
So as painful as some of this discussion has been in terms of what the number's gonna be, we haven't talked about the fact that if the override fails. Speaking of pain, we would have to revisit the budget and reduce it accordingly.
So you usually present two budgets, right? Usually, and Dean Carroll, correct me if you've seen something different, but every town I've been in that's had an override, and all towns I've seen, usually have two articles on town meeting. You have the balanced budget article, which is the article that has, you know, usually substantial cuts in it, and then you have the budget article that's contingent upon the successful passage of a Prop 2.5 override at the ballot. So you present two budgets that day. One budget is the, you know, let's say that you guys go through this budget and you say, you know, there's nothing we can really touch. It's kind of the way it is. We want to put this budget forward. We remove or we don't remove free cash. We do or we don't remove ambulance receipts. We put that forward and say, we need an override to make this work. And then we have a second budget, which gets down to a balanced budget. And then again, you still decide, do we keep in free cash? Do we keep in ambulance receipts? Or do we take them out, and how much do we have to cut, and we have to reduce that budget by that amount? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
don't like it, but it makes sense.
And along with that, you wanna figure out what it's gonna increase on the tax rate. Just hope, you know, people think it's gonna be a huge amount, and it sometimes isn't.
No, but it's also forever. It
Yeah.
doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
And it's,
But at the same time, if we're doing this,
Yep.
and I mean we, because we're all in this together, everybody in this room, the select board and everybody else, every, department manager, we should plan for the future too, so that we're not revisiting this next year.
Yep. And that's why
or
I-
the year after, and the year after, et cetera.
that's why you don't cut it down to the dollar. You don't take just as much as you think you're gonna need now, or does it make sense?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do you
Right.
want to factor in the fact
Sure.
of what Mark presented earlier around free cash, diminishing its dependency?
Yeah.
And maybe you look at doing it right off the get-go.
Yeah, if
I-
you're gonna
I mean,
pass
I
an
don't know.
override, do you make up for the 2 years
Those are the
that you
discussions
missed?
we need to have.
Do you make up for the 2 years that we missed and started?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
All right,
Yeah.
good point. Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean,
Lot to talk about, lot to look at.
and by the way, I don't know how we would create a balanced budget to present. I understand the concept of the two, but we are so out askewed right now.
Yeah.
I don't see how one can even be presented
So usually.
without cutting services.
So, but that's the thing, right,
Severely.
Steve? That's what a balanced budget is in this case, is it's a cut to services.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Usually what happens, in most towns is the direction goes to the TA to work with the department heads, and to give certain direction. There's some things we can't cut. We talked about this before, right? Fixed costs, right?
Right.
You can't cut the retirement
Yeah.
benefits, we're on the hook for them. You
Right.
can't cut the school budget, you can cut the school budget as long as a few other towns jump on board, but if they don't, you can't cut the school budget.
I understand.
You don't really have a lot of control over the voc budget. Health insurance is your flat rate piece. So there's certain things you can't touch. You take those out of the equation. Once you do that, that's about $10 to $11 million you can't touch. You're left with $5 to $6 million you can, and then you have to find a way to cut the 700 out of it. You take certain things that are non-essential, like paying for an annual town report, which is $500, we're not legally required to print it, you take that out. You go through those. And then you work with each of the departments. The smaller departments, for instance, the town accountant, you still have to pay your bills. And you can't have her not work, because then we don't pay the bills. You can't reduce those
Right.
out, there's no efficiencies to be had there. So, you can't touch that department for that piece. But you look at everything you can. You work with all the department heads, or I would work with all the department heads to get their budgets down to something, it's not gonna be ideal, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that these budgets are ones that departments have to live with and have to actually still provide as much service as they can if an override fails. So they need to be a huge player in how this works, because they're still, the department head's still gonna be left with managing this budget and managing what they have for a department if the override doesn't pass.
I agree. But I think on the other side, is it D?
Yes.
D made a good point. I think somehow it needs to be presented in the context of what does this mean to the individual household taxpayer? What is the net result?
So, and DLS has a great tool on it. I actually have all the printouts back at the office because I ran the numbers tonight, but they're in my budget book, not my town meeting book, not my budget book tonight. But you can run the tool very easily. It shows you the average household assessment, and you can change up the amount of the override estimated, and it gives you an average calculation, so people can have those.
And on the flip side of that, I think it's equally as important to show them what we're gonna lose if we don't.
Correct,
Because
correct, which I understand
Yeah.
is the idea of
and
presenting
it's one
both
of those things,
budgets.
it's like, yeah, neither side is good, but you gotta choose the lesser of two evils in reality, right?
Yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow
Yeah, it
for
is.
everybody.
That's a great way to put it. Okay.
On that happy note. Are we in item 7?
Yeah, we
I
in item
hope?
7 yet? Future meetings?
Moving right along. So, future meetings, we're meeting for sure on the 6th. I need to confirm, but the offer's been made for the fire department to be here next week. I will work to include somebody else next week here. And next week, we'll talk about the other weeks, because it looks like there's some challenge of the availability of this room. But right for now, everybody plan on being here, hopefully next Wednesday, March 6th. The updates of other committees that some of us serve on, I'll just give you the, which I think is important to put in the mix. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee has met, and none of that's been the discussion or part of this discussion this evening, but they have $500,000 worth of requests, which I would submit to you are pretty urgent, pretty serious, and likely are going to get the support of the CIPC committee. So that's separate and apart from the budget, but it's not separate and apart from the
That
whole.
really adds to the total, really.
Exactly. So,
Mark, do you know what's in the capital depreciation fund?
do I know how much is in there? 36,000. In the last 2 years, we've bought mowers and ditch attachments and small items, which was useful, but none of what is being presented to CIPC could possibly be funded by the capital depreciation fund. So, which speaks to the free cash issue of building that up, so that some of those lesser costly items can be taken out of capital depreciation. So while I was not feeling well last night, I didn't mean to make everybody sick tonight by this discussion, but we got to have it. It was healthy, and we'll work together, as Steve said. We're all in it together, and we've got a big job ahead of us in the next 30 days. So,
Any new business?
any new business? None.
Old
Old
business.
business? None.
Public session.
D?
Mrs. Malone, would you like to add anything?
No comments.
No comment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. We stand adjourned.
Have a good evening, folks.